Okay. Kia ora tātou. So we'll get into the formal meeting. I'll Dennis here to give us a presentation. So I'm going to skip the initial formalities and minutes, and we'll come back to those afterwards. So in the interest of your time, I think that is. So we're going to go straight to the. Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman and strategy group members. I presume we're underway now, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
The
cameras are rolling.
I like seeing the formalities. Hey, well, I'll just give a very brief introduction. I think you've all met Professor Dennis Osconducture. He's our chair in Lakes Water Quality at Waikato University. Dennis has been there for about just over 2 years, 2.5 years now, building up a really good team and research program there that connects with our Lakes program, connects with Lakes Trust, the Regional Council, District Council, and many groups and iwi groups within the community. And rather than me saying much more, you've seen Dennis's report, which is in your agenda, and Dennis will give you a brief rundown or presentation on that, and be open for some questions at the end of that. So, thank you, Dennis.
Kia ora, Mr. Chairman. Kia ora, strategy group members. It's really a pleasure to present my second annual report in this role to this group. I think I do have a.
Yes, sorry, we have a bit of a technical challenge with the screen.
Yep.
Maybe if you want to sit over here, then you can view half of your presentation. But what's on YouTube Live is the proper view. So if members want to go back to see the presentation, it will be there.
Okay, hopefully we can see some of the things I wanted to present really. I do assume that people have seen the report, and I wanted to just highlight a few really exciting sort of research projects and outcomes that are quite interesting for us and very novel. So I'm not going too much into detail around the budgets and the collaborations that we have developed over the last couple of years. So I wanted to acknowledge, and unfortunately you can't see the team here. I wanted to acknowledge that I'm speaking on behalf of a pretty large team that we've been able to build up at the Waikato University with really a whole range of academics, postdoctoral researchers, and PhD master students. Or most of them are focusing their work in and around the Te Arawa Lakes, covering a wide range of disciplines related to freshwater ecology, chemistry, modelling, biomonitoring, and pest management. So it's a shame that we can't see those images really.
Dennis, just quickly on that, if you jump on the YouTube and the Regional Council site, it's being live streamed, so you can see it properly on there. People do want to see it on their devices.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's going to be actually really nice because we have a few really fascinating slides, I think, anyway. So we are working under 5 research themes, broad research theme as part of our program. Today, I really wanted to highlight a few projects around some of the modelling work that we are working on and developing to support the ongoing management of the lakes. We are focusing more increasingly on climate change impact, so I would like to highlight a few projects there, current ones and upcoming ones. And also wanted to really sort of acknowledge and highlight that we are really excited about working with the Te Arawa Lakes Trust on some of the Mātauranga Maori aspects of our research, focusing on mahunga kai species. So just wanted to also mention that we are sort of providing quite exciting work from our end to the ongoing management of the lakes. 2 projects I wanted to highlight in this presentation are really the Lake Rotorua Science Review, for which we collated a summary report at the end of last year, which really sort of is highlighting quite a large body of research that is being carried out on a 5-yearly review cycle for Lake Rotorua as part of the Climate Change 10 work. The other project I wanted to highlight is the Arawa Channel diversion wall work that we've recently completed as part of the 7-year review cycle as part of the consent review. We've been able to really utilize this review cycle to develop some of the modeling tools further, and then sort of continuously providing us with more insight into how the lake is actually responding to the diversion wall. Fortunately, you can't see this here, but if you're looking at the presentation online, there are a few video clips here that highlights the way we do the modeling now is really we're using three-dimensional, like fairly sophisticated modeling work that tells us the fate of the water that enters Lake Rotorua via the Arawa channel and how that actually drives water quality dynamics in that lake. And I'm showing a video clip here. You might be able to just sort of barely see on the right-hand side here where the water enters Lake Rotorua in the red sort of color streaming into Lake Rotorua, generating some fairly complicated dynamics. And as part of this work, we wanted to thoroughly assess the effectiveness of the wall and how the lake actually, Lake Rotorua has responded to that wall. In the next slide, oh, that's a shame, we can't see that. We're looking at some really nice video clips around the effectiveness of the wall, where we're simulating actually physically a wall in the lake and how the Arawa channel water is diverted downstream into the Kaituna River. So you mind if I stand up and show just that briefly so people can focus there? So you see this is the top view of Lake Rotorua. And the red color here represents water that enters the lake via the Arawa channel. This is water, and the wall diverts the water very clearly down to the river. And that had implications for the water quality in the lake, and we've done a thorough assessment on that. We found that conclusively that the wall has actually contributed to a substantial improvement in water quality in the lake, and has actually brought about an improvement in trophic level index as the key water quality indicator that Regional Council is using as part of their reporting framework. What we also found as part of this work is actually that the lake is still responding to those changes. So by putting in the wall and diverting that Arawa channel water away from the lake, we've changed the internal dynamics in Lake Rotorua, and we found that the lake is actually still responding and will do so for quite a few years to come, actually. So the ongoing monitoring as part of this sort of review cycle is absolutely crucial aspect for us to understand how the lake will respond over time.
That's a quick question, and not related directly to the lake, but a concern for iwi downstream of the Kaituna is that in the wall we know you're diverting more nutrients down there. Is there any staff that might just give us an update about whether there's any relationship? I recall in the past we couldn't see a relationship of high nutrient loads in the river. But has that changed at all over the course of the wall being?
I think Dennis can probably answer.
Well,
that.
cool. So
Sorry,
we took the review cycle as an opportunity to look at the data more closely in the Kaituna River.
Nice.
And we didn't find any evidence that the diversion wall has actually impacted water quality dynamics in the Kaituna River. So there are other drivers that override any effect that the wall might have had on the water quality in the Kaituna River.
Thank you.
But having said that, that's probably related to the alum dosing changes that we've made at Lake Rotorua. Since 2010.
Yeah, there was some evidence that the alum dosing and the associated reduction in phosphorus concentration and sort of translates into the water quality dynamics that we see observed in the Kaituna River as well. Yeah. I guess the main conclusion that we found is it didn't appear to be any adverse effects of the wall on the water quality in the river. Yeah.
Can I confirm, please, what you're saying is that water is flowing from the upper Kaituna towards the lower Kaituna.
Mm-hmm.
There's no evidence that create adverse quality impacts on the lower Kaituna.
So we found that the lower Kaituna River, there's a water quality monitoring site in the lower Kaituna. It was too far away for us to draw some strong conclusions around the effects of the wall, because there's other factors in catchment that influence.
That's in the lower Kaituna catchment rather than the upper Kaituna. The diversion, the water from Lake Rotorua and Rotorua going to the lower Kaituna. At the moment, you see no evidence of affecting the water quality of the lower Kaituna. In terms of nutrient.
So I can probably specify my comments around the way we looked at the data. So we focused the analysis on the upper Kaituna, and the lower Kaituna site was too far away for us to draw strong conclusions.
But where you said earlier that the diversion of water through the Ohau Channel wall going to the Kaituna River does not seem to affect the nutrient content of the Kaituna River.
That's right, that's correct.
Okay, so
Yeah.
my question is that on the basis of the evidence you have in your hands at the moment, the flows of water for Lake Rotorua and Lake Rotoiti into the Kaituna River do not adversely affect the nutrient composite, nutrient level of Kaituna River.
So that we only looked at that with regards to the effects of the wall on the changes in the water quality dynamics of the river.
But the rapid asked the question at the moment, have you checked? Ask the question whether the Kaituna River was affected by that nutrient diversion.
And the answer is, based on our analysis, is no.
Okay, that's good. That's all I want to know. Thank you.
That's quite important.
It is important.
That's very important.
Because when we're looking into the effect of the we are up the Kaituna, and we always consider about the lower Kaituna, there are two concerns, quantity and quality. So if quality, there's no evidence of adverse effects, that's good.
That's right, but it doesn't mean that the lake water quality doesn't affect the water quality in the Kaituna River. It was just related to the wall, if that makes sense. Yeah.
No, I don't understand that, sorry.
So we looked at the water quality in the Kaituna River before the wall was constructed, and for the period after the wall was put in place. And we didn't find any substantial changes in the water quality dynamics of Kaituna River.
Okay, so what you're saying, the wall has not exacerbated the water quality of Lower Kaituna River.
Yeah, that's
But it
right.
doesn't mean that the nutrient component of the Rotorua lake flowing into the Kaituna does not affect the quality of the water in the Kaituna.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so at some point in time, I need to ask a question, what is the relative effect?
The relative effect.
Well,
Yeah.
assuming Lake Rotorua had a sustainable nutrient levels, that is mahi embraces 435 tons a year. The assumption is that the Kaituna will benefit from it. The question at the moment is that what is the current situation? I assume because we are not at a sustainable level, I assume that is adverse effect on the Kaituna River because we have got high nutrients diverted to the Kaituna River.
Mr. Chairman, to solve this question, I'm going to suggest perhaps we could link you to the reports in the first place and then have some discussion about that. One to one.
Yep, happy with that.
Thank you,
Rob.
I just have one question around the sedimentation impacts of the wall. My relations from Master Takinga would say that the mouth of the exit point is building up in sediment to the degree that it's affecting the Ohau and the egress and ingress of the Ohau channel.
Yeah.
You got any comment on that? Because there is considerable sediment buildup.
Yeah, so that's right. We haven't looked at it specifically as part of our work. I'm not sure if that was part of the 7-year review package that was put together, that the buildup of sediment at the entry point of the Ohau channel.
No, it wasn't.
The exit point, yeah, sorry.
No, but there is a change in that area, of course, because the wall protects that delta area, what they call delta area, away from the lake. So there's some changes there. At the moment, we've gone back up there with the harvest team, and there's still ability to get through there at boats. You just have to know where you're going. But there's probably some minor issues around that.
I think it's
So I know, Andy, you want to move on, but what the professor has said is not a view or a perception held by the people that we hear about at regional council at the lower end of the Kaituna. So I think somehow this needs to be clarified and conveyed to them, this new view that you're holding, and based obviously, as we've been saying all morning, on science and research, and because the perception is all your dirty water in Rotorua is denigrating all our properties at the lower end of the Kaituna, which is clearly not the case.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. Yeah, just quickly reiterate the point that the water quality in those lakes does affect water quality in the Kaituna River, but that relationship hasn't changed when the wall was put in place. So when you do see an algae bloom or bad water quality in Lake Rotorua or Rotoiti, that water will obviously enter the Kaituna River. But yeah, I'm happy to actually have those conversations with people at the low Kaituna catchment. Yes, absolutely.
That's quite important. I just want to pick up on Tari's point around the sediment build-up. Andy, can we just make a note that try and incorporate that into the future reviews? I don't know whether there's any adverse environmental impacts, but there's potentially a navigational issue. But if you just think about how you weave that into future reviews. Now, I think the other principle of that is the upstream effect of the wall, not just the downstream.
That can be relatively easily included in reviews because we do survey cross sections right through the Hawhau Channel and down the extent of the wall, so you can report on it.
Unfortunately, you can't see that very well here, but because of the availability of these long-term data sets now, there's some really important insights to be gained from analyzing that data in more detail around understanding that variation and variability of water quality in those lakes. Because we know that, especially looking at the trophic level index data, that fluctuates quite substantially throughout from year to year, as we all know. But there are some aspects of that variability that we don't understand very well. So with Whitney here, you see that photo there, she embarked on that analysis to understand the drivers of those long-term fluctuations in water quality. And on this slide, I'm sort of highlighting a few of the drivers that we were interested in. And you'll see that some of the drivers we don't really have a lot of influence over in terms of management. We can't control for air temperature or weather or climate, but they're all drivers of water quality. So as part of this analysis, we try to understand the relative importance of those manageable drivers and those unmanageable drivers that ultimately drive the trophic level index up and down. There will have implications about how we interpret the way we meet targets or we fail to meet targets in some of those lakes. As an example here, we found for Lake Rotorua that water level was actually a really strong driver for water quality at extreme levels. So we find that at extremely low water levels here, that was during the mid-90s, there was a severe drought going across New Zealand. The water quality in Lake Rotorua actually deteriorated quite substantially, and it was clearly linked to water level dynamics. On the other side, we found that the water level increase around this time here. So there was, I remember, in the early 2000s, there was really extremely high water levels in Lake Rotorua that actually resulted in a substantial improvement in water quality. So without any management actions, the water quality does fluctuate quite substantially in those lakes, and I think that's a really important component to understand for us in terms of how much influence we have sort of manipulating that trophic level index with management actions. And so we've now just about to complete the similar work on many of the other Te Arawa lakes for which we have the data available. And we from a research perspective, there was quite a few interesting patterns that we're finding and contrasting patterns that we're finding in those lakes. So while water level, for example, might influence water quality in Lake Rotorua, that might not necessarily be the case in some of the other lakes. So coming out of this work, we'll have a much more comprehensive understanding of some of those natural drivers that result in sort of these TLI values going up and down from year to year. So I think there might be sort of nice perspective on understanding those TLI targets.
Dennis, I just want to check whether my oversimplification of reading these graphs is roughly right. But it appears that when the water level is low, the TLI is higher.
This
pushed up.
Yep.
And then when it's high, it tends to drop it down.
Yeah.
Is that a fair simplification?
No, it's exactly what we're seeing at the extreme side end of things. During average water level fluctuations, we don't see that effect. We do have we have really good explanations for that effect in Lake Rotorua. During low water levels in this time here, we think that the stratification patterns in that lake has actually increased, and that resulted in recycling of nutrients internally in the lake, and that pushed the water quality into this area here where where things didn't really look so good anymore. And during those high water levels, dilution is a major factor in actually diluting the nutrients in the lake, and sort of makes it look like the water quality is improving.
So is it a fair assumption to say that if we are, it be beneficial for water quality for lake levels in Rotorua to be as high as possible?
So there are other effects on high water lake levels, obviously, where communities are affected and the ecology is affected as well.
But in terms of water quality,
with
the
that,
more the volume of water, the better the quality of the water.
during extreme high lake levels, so that's the key element of this. So if we wanted to run the lake level in Rotorua at its extreme high levels, then the water quality might actually improve in the long run. But I'm not sure if that's a conclusion we want to draw from.
No.
So it's more of a dilution.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. So, I wanted to sort of highlight a few things around the climate impacts, impact research that we're embarking on. I'm showing this is a time series of floods in New Zealand, going back a number of decades all the way up to the last couple of years. And obviously, we all know that climate change is upon us, and can put up these summary statistics in various ways. But in terms of flooding in New Zealand, they've increased from maybe 1 or 2 floods a year to somewhere around 4 or 7 floods a year across Aotearoa. So that's pretty major changes in terms of the way we look at climate change, and it will obviously have an effect on the lakes. This map here is a screenshot of the recently released, the latest generation of climate change projections for New Zealand. And this is the map just sort of zooms in on the Rotorua lakes here. And we find that the latest generation of those climate change projections will impact the Bay of Plenty and the lakes, and we're trying to understand how that actually might influence the way we look at some of the management actions. So an interesting study that we've recently embarked on is a master's project with Katie up in the corner there. And I'm sort of borrowing a few photos here from Andy, who went out after Cyclone Gabrielle affected the area around lakes Rotorua and Rotoehu, where some of the residential areas were flooded and the communities were quite severely affected. So Katie's work is focused on understanding the climate change effects on future flooding in those areas around those lakes. This is water level dynamics in Lake Rotorua. And once again, you can see that the sort of low lake levels during very severe droughts that sort of went across New Zealand. There was actually labeled a 1 in a 200-year flood in many parts of New Zealand during that time. And this is lake level here during Cyclone Gabrielle. And we understand from the climate change projections that the severity, the frequency and duration of heavy rainfall events will increase. And we want to really get a better handle on what that would mean for flooding extent around those lakes and the communities. So it's a really exciting project for us that does require quite a bit of research to actually understand the water cycle in those lakes. Just measuring water level doesn't enable us to simulate climate change effects on those dynamics. So we need to really do the research around understanding the complete water cycle in those places.
Professor Dennis, which climate change scenario are you using for your modeling?
Yeah, so we're pretty open. We want to use the entire range. So the latest generation is looking at those socioeconomic pathways. They're not directly translated into the RCP scenarios from the last generation. So I think the Regional Council used the RCP 4.5 in the Plan Change 10 assessment. I don't think it's directly translated to the new socioeconomic pathway, so we can probably look at a range of scenarios. But it's really something that's a discussion that we want to have with this group and people who are affected by that in terms of what people think is what we can reasonably expect, really.
Yeah, thank you.
Just a question on climate change. There's a prediction around sea level rise. And the sea level rise is obviously there's a gradation effect on the lakes, on the waterways going into. There's a build-up happening. Is there any research happening in terms of the backwash of that type of situation?
Yeah, very little in New Zealand. It's a really fantastic question, which is hopefully something that we can address in our next research proposal that we're working on with Chris Lettershall at the Taronga campus. It's part of the way we want to actually tackle some of those connected issues across, the spring to sea kind of issues, really. So short answer is not yet. It's a shame you can't see these photos here, actually, for a project that we're involved in. It's a much larger project that is sort of part of the Fish Futures project, which is led by Corfron in collaboration with the Arawa Lakes Trust and ENQSEPs. And we're privileged to have a PhD student contributing to that larger project, really, with Olivier here in the photo. And he's very interested in building more resilience for coral in the Arawa Lakes, and he's actually involved in work that is looking at constructing artificial reefs in lakes Okaro and Rotorua to provide habitat for coral that are under pressure from multiple sides, really. So there's catfish predation on coral, there's habitat quality and quantity issues related to water quality and possibly climate change. So by building artificial reefs, the hope is that we can provide some refuge and resilience to those individuals that are being sort of really impacted from every angle in those lakes. So really exciting project that we just recently started on with Olivier. And in one of the photos, I think, Sawita, you're in one of those photos, and Andy, you too, actually, where the work you did in Okaro by building one of those artificial reefs in there. So on that note, on a similar note, then the climate impacts on those species is a bit of a concern for us, because we have a pretty good understanding of how climate change will impact on temperature and oxygen in those lakes. And we know pretty well for fish that climate change will put a squeeze on those fish species, where surface water temperatures become really warm, possibly too warm for fish to survive, and bottom waters become too anoxic, so devoid of oxygen for them to survive. And they might end up with a very narrow sort of range of habitat that they have available in those lakes. It's pretty well established for fish, but obviously the same argument can be made for koura and kakahi. And we've recently tried to develop like a habitat quality indicator for those species using some of the modeling tools that we've developed, where we are trying to understand that squeeze on those species as well. The blue color here indicates that's optimal or very good habitat for those species. The green area indicates it's tolerable, it's not great, but species can survive. And the orange color represents lethal sort of habitat, so they can't survive in those areas. And ultimately, we expect that climate change will sort of narrow down this blue range quite substantially and might increase that orange area. So with that, so that's sort of very exploratory and preliminary at this stage. So we are looking at developing a master's level project with the Arawa Lakes Trust to explore that in much more detail and get a better handle on what climate change effect might actually mean for those species. In which, and we can link that back to some of the habitat work that is ongoing too as well, in terms of trying to understand where we can implement these reef structures, for example, or other habitat kind of structures to really just give them a fighting chance under climate change. And the last bit I wanted to sort of mention, which is really exciting, I did present this last week, and I said the funding announcement was going to be made the day after the presentation, and we've got the funding for a new project. Really excited about this. This is really developing some pretty sophisticated forecasting tools for water quality in Lake Rotorua. This is a part of an project that's funded by MB with the Arawa Lakes Trust as a partner. I'm really excited about this. This is really looking at building something analogous to a weather forecast for water quality in Lake Rotorua, including temperature, oxygen, and hopefully cyanobacteria blooms as well. It's a very ambitious project, and we don't know if we're going to get good forecasts, but we're starting out. This is the first time we're doing this in the Southern Hemisphere, actually, so pretty excited. So for your project, so I'll be happy to update you in my annual reports over the next 3 years on this project, really. So thank you for listening. I know we've gone over time, but I'm happy to answer any more questions, really.
Okay, any final questions?
Just the funding has been confirmed.
Has been confirmed, yeah.
Wow.
The contract.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. No, really, really exciting. So the project starts on the 1st of October, actually. So we need to get things in place to hit the ground running. Yeah.
And I'm going to ask the same question to you again, Dennis, that I asked at Regional Council on your presentation of the annual report for this forum, because this is where the rubber hits the road in terms of going forward. So what are we not doing from a lake restoration water quality improvement program that we should be doing? What are we not doing that we should be doing? Yeah.
It's a slight variation on the question.
Well, I'm open to interpretation, Dennis.
I have thought about this.
I knew you would.
I don't think I have a solid answer for you, but I can probably highlight our experience with the Rotorua Lakes program and compare it to overseas restoration management programs. For a lot of the lakes, especially Lake Rotorua, this is a world-class lake management approach that takes a long-term perspective and manages the lake exactly like we would describe it in a textbook. The catchment management in lake restoration, a solid monitoring plan, having clear targets and expectations. Those are all ingredients for success.
Yep.
It's a long-term journey.
Great.
I guess that's probably summarized in the summary report that we put out last year. And for the other lakes, I think we also need to probably keep perspective on where the water quality sits in some of those lakes. A lot of the TLIs are at or close to their targets. Andy and I talked about this earlier about, where have we come from 30 years ago? Where was the water quality? And I think a lot of the lakes looking in pretty good shape. So I don't have a good answer for some of the other lakes, but that's probably something that we are interested in exploring in much more detail.
Could I add something there, Dennis? Too, and I think it relates to your slide around Lake Rotorua. And that's a lake that we're all concerned about because the TLI has been bad for a long time. And it was close, it actually achieved its TLI back in about 2014. And then it's got worse since then. And it's understanding the university is looking at those drivers of change in water quality, particularly where a lake's a long way out of its TLI, so that we understand, is there something the regional council can do to manage this better, or the community can manage this better, or are there massive environmental drivers that are way outside our hands? And so that's what we're expecting to get out of the work on Rotorua, and that can be applied to other lakes. It is being applied to other lakes where necessary. And it also, we have the tools available to do things. We've got a resource consent for wider alum dosing on Lake Rotorua. And before we make a decision as to whether we should or shouldn't do that, we're going through the science program and going, well, what's your advice on what's driving this? And will changing our alum dosing program, and is it likely to achieve a change in water quality? So we've got a really good connection between the science and the management for all of our lakes.
Yeah, I think one of the things that strikes me is that there's people around this area and other areas, we know that our water quality is crap. We know that. You can't swim in it, you can't play from it anymore. Things are changing, the dynamics are changing. Which then gets us back to our behaviours. In time you're going to prove, there are things happening in our lakes, and it's happening because of this, that, and the other, climate change, rising sea levels, whatever you want. But the fact of the matter that the pollutants that we're putting into the lake are still happening. And therefore, I guess one of the exercises we did, Mr. Chair, just before with Alba, is trying to actually reconstitute our behaviours relative to our observations that our lakes are crap in terms of water quality. And so basically the science is sort of digging deep and giving us that information that it is, and this is what's happening, and gives us some tools for future forecasting. But I certainly think that the forecasting we certainly need around this table as we go for the Arawa Lakes Strategy Group is how are our behaviours, how are our values lining up with the fact that we've got crappy water, and by changing our behaviours we'll actually add to the improvement in the quality of the lake. So, I'm just trying to get the science and reality checks that we've got, because we talk about Mokopuna futures, intergenerational. So this is an intergenerational journey. Really, it is. So 3 generations out, what will the water look like? Knowing this science and actually changing our behaviours that are core to the science that we're seeing, but also our mātauranga observations. Because a lot of our everyday living is around mātauranga. Most of the population are observing these things, right? So in effect, that's mātauranga, people living in the place. So I just wanted to emphasize that point because I think it's really, really important, the validity of the science that you're putting in front of us. And most people go, oh yeah, you're telling us it's crap, we know that, but you're also giving us tools to look at the future, intergenerational remedies. Because even if you look at climate change and rising sea levels over the next 10 years are predicted to go up, some say by 2.7 meters, that will change the backwash going into the lakes. So that's within the next generation. So I'm just talking about keeping our minds in the right balance here with the science, our observations and our behaviours and what we're trying to remedy through our discussions here on the stage. Sorry about that.
Fiona, no, thank you for articulating what I couldn't. So, Councillor Witters, maybe that sort of gave you a bit of an answer of what we need, what we're not doing.
Any other questions? Just a high level question for me. You mentioned that on a global scale, the program here is world class. Does that mean there's quite a lot of interest from other places? And is that a potential revenue stream that can help with the work that we're doing?
I'm not sure. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think from a research perspective, there's a lot of interest in Lake Rotorua from people elsewhere in the world. And we know that because when we go to overseas meetings and we present some of this work, people are blown away. And we have international people who want to come to New Zealand and work with us on some of the research. So I think it's really good for us. I'm not sure about the revenue side of things really, but I think we can definitely capitalize on the international interest in these lakes to get more insights, get more views on how these lakes function and what else needs to be done. So I think we're doing this, but yeah.
One other question for me, it's a generic one around, to what extent in the research system at the university do you bring in other disciplines? Because I assume most of the people, when I look at their backgrounds, environmental science kind of backgrounds, to what extent do you bring in a quantum physicist and say, hey, how do you see this, as an example?
Thanks for that question. So I think we could do better with like a multidisciplinary approach to some of the work that we're doing, for sure. We're still working in probably more siloed than we would like to. We are affiliated with the Environmental Research Institute at Waikato University that actually looks at a number of I think we're currently underway at a national scale, do that already with social scientists, iwi researchers, and like environmental scientists trying to come up with a much more integrated package. So yes, we're working towards that really. Nice. And I'm pretty happy with where we are, given that we are trained in a very narrow range of things. So even talking to some other people from other disciplines, it's not always easy. But yeah, I think there's nice programs currently going on that integrate those aspects.
Awesome.
And further, Mr. Chairman, the New Zealand Freshwater Science Society Conference is in Rotorua in November, in Rotorua in November 18 to 22. Te Taru and I are going to go along to hear to hear Dennis talk about all the different things he does, but looking forward to that, Dennis. And if other people want to join, the registrations are open now.
Thanks for advertising on our behalf. So we are actually organising the conference. It's a New Zealand-wide conference. We have a number of international people interested in joining us as well, and it's open to everybody, but it comes with a registration fee. Yeah, so really awesome if people can join.
Brenda, could you note to get that information out to members? Thank you. Okay, no further questions?
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you very much,
you,
Dennis.
Dennis.
Really appreciate the
Thank you.
contribution you make to this program. Okay, we'll go through the initial formalities and then get on to the next presentation. So just a reminder that we're live streamed. That reminder's too late. It's been happening for half an hour or so now. In terms of apologies, you mentioned them earlier, but we just need to formally move them. So we've got chair leader. Mayor Tapsell, are you still at early departure?
Yeah, apologies.
Kapai. Phil Thomas and Nookie Nicholson. So I'll ask for a mover and seconder.
Yep.
Taru,
Yep.
Councillor Waters. Those in favour say aye.
And Chairman Leaders in Apotiki today, Mr. Chairman, talking to Minister Jones about regional infrastructure.
It's where I'm about to go to very shortly as well.
Cool.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No problem.
Oh, are you going to Whakatane? Oh, right.
Okay, we've got no public forum today. No items that are not on the agenda that I'm aware of. Any declarations of conflict of interest? Oh. Minutes. So I'll take those as read. After a mover and seconder. Wait, how do we get it? Okay, so we will move on to item 8.2. The Rotorua Lakes Program Funding Deed Compliance. Pūrongoa tau in Te Mahere a Toru tau.
Just but going back to the minutes, Mr. Chairman, can we add in there, we had some correspondence sent away about golden clams, and there was an announcement today or later the week about NIWA getting funding from MB for golden clams research eradication. We just might.
We'll come back to that because there's an item at the end of the agenda
Right.
on golden clams. Goodbye.
So morena koutou, like speaking to me, which is pretty amazing.
Oh,
Also, I'll just try and add up this, and I just might collect the Miranda to remind me what was in there when I do it. But so the purpose of this report that's on your agenda is to meet the requirements of the current legal funding for the program, just to meet the compliance requirements, and the reporting is done to ensure we remain in compliance with that funding deed with MFE. Just noting that there's some changes to that deed underway, and you're also redoing the strategy. So the only point of this is to meet those compliance requirements. So there's the Pūrongoa Tauju for the previous financial year, and that's attached in your agenda, and also a Te Mahere Torutau, which I'll thank you, Linda, which is the 3-year plan for the program. So that's including the current financial year and the two years following. So we can review the Te Mahere Torutau if we want to later, as a result of your work on the strategy.
I think that's just.
Oh, no, that's not connected, so I'm just going to,
It's just the YouTube.
oh, it's just the YouTube.
Rules you can see it.
Thank you, Linda. I've worked it out. Okay, so next slide. So just in terms of some highlights in the Pūrongoa Tau from the previous financial year, so we built the Wineata wetland, which was a 9-hectare constructed wetland, towards the engineering solutions for Lake Rotorua, which make up the integrated framework. So that's that framework that the strategy group has committed to make that generational change towards this of the sustainable nitrogen load to Lake Rotorua by 2032. So there's some different components of that I'll talk about a bit further on. Obviously the Rusaviti retic, so in terms of the defunded lakes I'm just talking about here. So there was the Rusaviti reticulation scheme that's now completed, but there's about 50 connections still to be made as the landowner approvals come through for those. There was no weed harvesting or alum dosing on Lake Rotorua because of the very high lake levels, just making that not possible. Those activities are no longer defunded. And the TLI of Lake Rotorua is actually quite high at the moment, and we're going, as mentioned in the previous presentation, we're going to just keep working with Dennis and his team on that, just to work out what actions might be useful ongoing there, particularly once the lake levels recede. So the incentive scheme, and you can't see this, it's right at the bottom of that slide, but the incentive scheme is continuing. With clear messaging, and I've been out to Rotorua, and also our chairman has spoken at the Lakes Water Quality Society, AGM and things during the year, with that clear messaging about the need for that voluntary contribution towards the sustainable nitrogen upload for Lake Rotorua by 2032. So when that framework was adopted, instead of doing it all through rules, that collaboration with the community over that long period of time led to that framework, which had some through rules, some through voluntary action, and some by the engineering solutions. So the voluntary action part isn't progressing like we would like. But in saying that, if you look at the contribution of the rural landowner community, so the rules and the incentives, actually the 2027 managed reduction target is being met. So they are doing their bit with of the rules and the incentives. And I'll ask one of my team to come to your next meeting in December and just show you our new reporting dashboard, which takes all of the compliance information submitted, includes the incentives, and shows you the progress towards those managed reduction targets to 2032. So the landowners aren't taking up the incentive scheme, but they are farming below their NDAs. So that's how that 2027 target's been met. And that's a massive thing, a massive contribution from them. So we've just got to work out the gap as to why they're not giving that nitrogen enough in perpetuity, I guess, if they're not using it. And we'll talk more about that at the next meeting. We've got some really good dashboards to show that.
Hey, Helen, a quick question
Yes.
on the Rotorua TLI. It's going back to the graphs you had earlier, Dennis. So the 3-year rolling average is 4.4 and it's the highest in 5 years. Yet the graphs suggested as the levels go higher. Is this just a timing thing and we'll see it drop potentially?
We're working on that right now, actually, as part of the fact that the TLI is quite high in Rotorua at the moment. So.
Okay.
Yeah, there was, so I was thinking about that too when Dennis was talking, and this, in the last year been, like, I had people ringing me up and saying, what have you, like, they had lived at Rotorua for 40, or had back there for 40 years, saying, what have you done with this lake, because it is amazing at the moment, and I had to say, oh, actually nothing. But, and also, you know, I've got a friend that his mum lives there and they were swimming all summer in Rotorua, which is pretty unheard of. So, but then we had that bloom really late in summer, and that's affected the TLI. So it's a little bit tricky, it's a little bit funny. Actually, most of summer on Rotorua was actually really great. And it's really great at the moment, but we did have a bloom for a while there, which isn't, you know, which is relatively common on Rotorua. So it's a little bit tricky to understand. It's not straightforward.
I think it's an interesting point. You know, TLI suggests it's in bad shape, yet people's experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting in the water is saying something else. So just take note of that.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't see these photos, but I just had some photos there of the running out of wetland construction. So there was some of the top team installing the riffles made out of manuka brush. And then a photo showing those at an aerial level, and then of the planted wetlands. So they're available in your reporting. Oh, that's the Zoom. Next slide, Miranda. Not seeing that yet, but on my screen. So the 3-year plan to Mahiria Toruto. So this is based on the existing deed and on that ongoing commitment to that the sustainable nitrogen road for Lake Rotorua is the last thing to be achieved under the current deed funding through the integrated framework. So so it's based on continuing with the construction wetlands towards the engineering solution 50-tonne target and with the incentive scheme. And that is as budgeted and adopted by the Regional Council in its long-term plan. So, based on the current deed and on the Regional Council's long-term plan, that is where the remaining funds go to keep that commitment to the sustainable load for Lake Rotorua via the integrated framework. So I think that's the last slide.
Sure.
That's perfect time.
Sorry, yeah.
I just have a quick question. I just note in the report, and it's on page 47, but it's regarding the, what do they call it? Integrated framework. And it mentions that a reduction of 320 tonne is required. But then just on the 2 pages after that, on page 49, it reports on the reduction of nitrogen load, how much it has reduced from 982 tonnes to 761 tonnes. And I'm not sure if I'm just reading this wrong, but the numbers aren't quite adding up for me.
Yes, so that what you can see there is what's come out at the 200 reduction from the 981 to the 82 or something. That's based on the compliance reporting for Plan Change 10 and includes the incentive scheme. So that's about the change that the owners have made on their land. Now, that doesn't translate to the lake. So we have a factor that we apply to that we understand what's getting to the lake. And so it's about 100-ton reduction to the lake from that reduction of the land. So what the changes that you make on the land are measured through overseer, and that reduction at the land doesn't all translate to the lake. So that's the difference that you're seeing. So there's about 100-ton reduction to the lake.
It's called attenuation, isn't it? Is that the?
We call it a lake ratio. So there's lots of ways that what's lost to the land doesn't translate to the lake. Because obviously there's margins of error in the measuring and the modelling and things like that. So, you know.
So I mean, just to understand it right, if there is a moderating factor of 100 tons to the lake, is that reasonable to assume that the nitrogen load to the lake at the moment would be around 655 tons, and the target is 435?
So it's about 755. It was 755
It was in 20.
at the benchmarking.
At the benchmarking period. So 10 years ago it was 755.
Mm-hmm.
But are we saying we still at 755, or we 100 tons lower, less?
So I'd need to go back to the Plan Change 10 review that was done last year, the science review, and I can send that to you, Stavros, and that sets it all out. But I'm not going to sort of, it's reduced by about 100 tons, but I need to go back to the science review report and just check that before I give any information on that. But that's been presented to this group, so I'm thinking to recirculate it. And so the other thing I would say is that the dashboard reporting that you'll get at the next meeting will show that. So there's still 30 properties that haven't submitted their compliance information for Plan Change 10. We're still working for those. They're the smaller properties. They're under 40 hectares. So by December we'll have that information, and then I'll be able to present you a complete picture on that.
Just so I'm understanding this right, in terms of the in-lake ratio versus what overseer is saying. So there's one model that says the amount of nutrients going into the ground is this much, and there's another model you use that says this is what's actually in the lake.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the difference.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I think that's what was confusing me when I was trying to.
Yeah. That's a really good way of explaining it. That's excellent. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then there's a grey line in between the two, the attenuation and all these other factors. Okay.
Perhaps we can, sorry, for you, Mr. Chair, if I'm getting confused, others might as well. So maybe it's something to look at in terms of how we're continuing to report on the progress so that it's just really clear for us in our community.
I think the dashboard will do that, and that's what I want to show you in December. So we are working on that, and that's what the dashboard is for. So you will be able to, there's a public facing dashboard that anyone can look at any time, and it has the target and it has the progress towards it, and it removes all the scientific analysis and comparisons that are behind that. Yeah, so our people, actually, so that could come from the strategy and the way that we report, and the new revised reporting and how we report it. Yeah, exactly. Cool. So sorry, the recommendations of the report were to, just for the purposes of decompliance, were to adopt those two reports that I've worked with, just Arawa Lakes Trust and RLC. Just to fulfill the requirements of the deed.
Just one comment around the lake statistics. They give us a snapshot and a 3-year average, but I'm quite interested somewhere in these reports in the future to show trend over long term. Because really this stuff takes a long time to make a difference, and I just can't see it. And I have seen it in other forms of reports, but I think it would be useful to always have it in the annual report. This is what the long-term trend is showing us.
So on that dashboard,
Mm.
I agree, and on that dashboard, I'm sorry, I haven't got it in front of me, but if Andy got on this, here it is. So you'll see that with the 3-year TLI for lakes, which is here, you'll see that they're all different colours. And you'll see up here that the blue refers to very likely improving. So the water quality or the TLI of that lake is very likely improving over the long term. The green refers to it likely improving over the long term. So we're talking about the very long term here. And the orange, that's Resigehu. That's likely worsening over the long term. So that dashboard doesn't tend to do that. But
sorry.
we could always open to ways of making this clearer. It is.
I think just for clarity, just one that just shows a high level trend.
Yes.
There's a lot of information in
Yes,
this
there's a lot
one
of information there.
Mr. Chairman, something that's come up in a discussion with Ian Kusabs recently is what's the water quality of each of these lakes over about a 30-year period.
Yes.
And Dennis and I were just talking about that, and I think we should just commit to bringing back a report to this group as to what was the water quality, particularly the TLI, at that time, and what are those lakes looking like now, so that that will give you a reasonable picture of how
thank you, Andy, because when I say long term, it's beyond 10 years. I think more than 30 year, or as far as you can go, really, if the data's there.
So we could, perhaps next time we can bring the labels through a dashboard, and then we can aim that for the start of next year.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you've got one right in action, sorry.
I think one of the things that strikes me is that we often reflect in the now, but as you say, it's intergenerational change. But the urgency is now, that people are using it now and they want to see change now. Well, they're not going to see change now. And that's the reality check here as we have these conversations. We're talking intergenerational, and that is several generations out. Mukapuna, that's basically what you relates to. So this is what we're talking about, that future as opposed to the now, seeing changes now, but understanding the changes, and therefore the mechanisms we need to enact in order to bring that intergenerational change. So I'm just trying to open it up in my mind that, okay, it's not happening now, but we've got instruments in place to look forward into the future that we can actually, next generations can pick up and mobilize.
So maybe include a patience meditation embedded in the report.
To be fair, there are certain locations where you can definitely recognise a change. For example, Rotorua in 2004 and 2005 was a lot different to what it is now. And then Rotorua, even though we get occasional blooms, we've had a period of probably about 10 years since we did the second alum dosing plant where we didn't have any blooms for a period of 10 years. So to kind of feel bad about the lakes is probably not the appropriate emotion. I think there has been some improvement, some really significant improvement in some of our lakes.
The question really is sustainable improvement.
Yes.
Underlying that, because there will be some reversions over time that if sometimes expectations we raise are not able to be met because, sort of nature has its own way of impacting and reversing things depending on our behaviours.
Absolutely.
So, I'm excited by change, but within the particular framework really. Anyway, sorry.
I just want to add to that, your point around behaviours. I'm really conscious that we work on the symptoms of the issue in the lake, but there's a long lead in of a whole lot of different things, development plan, land use and whatnot, just to always keep mindful that there needs to be work happening on both ends, which we do in this program, but it goes a bit beyond what this program does as well. I think some of the other activities of RRC or developers in general, blah, 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 blah. Okay.
So, sorry, just also that refers back to the ongoing plan for the program that you're being asked to adopt. So, and to what Dennis has said, and to that commitment to the generational change. I hear quite often that the incentive scheme isn't making progress, but I think the target that was set for that was unrealistic. We're asking people to change the way that they have done business for a long time. The problem was created over several generations. It's not going to be solved in 5 years. And so, the sustainable nitrogen load by 2032 is a generational change target. And I think, you know, I think the advice of me, of staff in this program, and I think what Dennis was saying, is to keep your finger on the pedal of the change to leisure management with that target. If we redivert that money to other things, and don't keep that up, then we won't make the progress that we're making. And I think it is actually quite impressive. You know, I've summarised the statistics of land use change: 4,400 hectares of land use change in 5 years in the local catchment. 20% of the farming has been removed. You know, it's actually quite incredible. So if we just keep on at that, I think we will make. I think the farming community, and keep with us, that we will make that difference. I think. But it will take a longer time. Cool.
I had a question on the financials on page 67. So the year-to-date actual expenditure is 1.4 million. Total funding approved in the Mahere covers at the annual plan, or main plan for this was 4.4. Significant variance. Why did we underspend so much?
That's the incentive scheme. So 3.5 million was budgeted for the incentive scheme. And that isn't, you know, as we just talked about, made the progress. But I think we were a bit, thank you, Linda, a bit overzealous in budgeting with that. So the way that the Regional Council's long-term plan and the new deed that's being worked on at the moment budgets, that is $1.6 million annually. So I would have expected us to spend closer to 1.6 million last year, but there was one agreement that didn't get paid that side of the financial year. So it's not, you know, it will be paid this financial year. So I think we've got more realistic is that 1 to 1.6 million euro incentives. Yeah, I think 3.5 just wasn't realistic. But the way it's budgeted moving forward is far less than that, and that's where the difference is. So we did, on that actually, we did spend, there was a few unders and overs, we did spend about 80,000 more on wetlands, but that was covered by the underspend and incentives, and it was still within regional council budget. So there is a little bit of under and over.
You've touched on the Mahere Tau, the annual report. Anything you want to touch on in terms of the 3-year?
Really only just what I said about the keeping the commitment to that sustainable load for Lake Rotorua and achieving that. Yeah, that's what that 3-year plan proposes to do. And yeah, really that's kind of I think that's a key point out of what Dennis said. Yeah.
Well, I had a quick question around the Lake Rotorua constructed wetlands. So
Yes.
there's 2 million forecasted for that in the next financial year.
Yes.
Have we got enough projects in the pipeline?
Yes, so I'm hoping to build the one associated with the development at 31 Nongataha Road over summer, at least do some planting and some earthworks and some infrastructure there. So that would be the one I want to deliver. We're also working, we have some others in the pipeline with iwi and things, so we'll just keep plugging away at those. Again, it's long term, we've got a lot of stars have got to align, but yeah, you need to get on with it really. Yeah.
Just a quick technical question. I think you talked about a wetland within a development that's going.
Yeah.
To what extent is that funded by development contributions type stuff versus this fund? Because there's a bit of an argument there that actually you're creating additional pollution by creating this development. You need to offset it within, that's all part of your own cost as opposed to this fund helping you out with that.
So we're only providing groundwater treatment, which isn't a requirement of the development, obviously. So we're pumping groundwater, treating it and discharging it again. So we're not paying the cost of the developer. They have to provide stormwater detention associated with their development. So they have to, create a hole. And we're going to take their hole and turn it and pump groundwater into it and turn it into groundwater treatment.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've been very clear, we're not covering developer costs with public money.
Awesome. Cool. Any other part in terms of these two reports? No? Okay, so our recommendations to resolutions to move and to receive the reports and approve the 23-24, well, actually approve them as well in accordance with the requirements of the funding program. Can I have a move and second? Second. Councillor Winters. Okay, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. All right, item 8.3, so Arawa Lakes Trust update. I know Darren's had to pop off, but I assume William, Sweeter just popped out.
Jump.
Okay, we'll jump to the next one just to use this time. Rotorua Lakes Council update report. Devos. Page 78.
Kia ora tātou katoa. Thank you, Chair. I will take the report as read. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Winters.
So, Stavros Rotorua sewer scheme, there's some connections to be done yet. In terms of householders, landowners, whatever. So how long, so my question is, when does that connection cease to exist and it flicks over to a offset requirement from us? I'm trying to get a handle on the timeframes that you're going to allow these people to connect, because if they don't connect, we will have to enforce offset. So it's sort of a timing issue for us.
Yeah, Councillor Winter, thank you. I think there are two distinct, groups of people in Rotorua.
Yep.
We've got a group of people, my numbers might not be 100% accurate, but about 50 Maori whenua properties.
Yep.
That are multiple owners.
Yep.
And the actual authorized owner is still determined through the Maori court process, land processes. So this is a little bit of a slow process, slow burning process.
So you're expecting those ones to come on stream?
We do.
Oh, okay.
There are about 15 properties,
13?
the 13
Yep.
properties that said we don't want to connect.
Right.
So together with the regional council officers, we are writing to them and applying both the local government act, and the advice that you have to connect.
Yep.
Because you got a reticulation proximity to you.
Yep.
Because the alternative to that is either the application of the offset rule or an enforced connection.
Right.
Because the local government act allows us to enforce a connection.
Yeah.
So it's about 15 properties that we're working together with regional council officers, and jointly writing to these people to establish what the legal framework for that would be. But I would expect that over the next 6 to 12 months, if you don't connect, the enforcement takes place.
Okay.
The Maori whenua properties, it just depends on the determination of Maori land court.
Because it's my understanding, under the Rating Powers Act, you have the ability to start charging those ones now because they're within proximity to the main trunk line or whatever you call it. So you can start charging. I think it's half the.
Well, in rough water terms, the main reticulation is about 60% of the the total cost of the project.
Yeah.
A bit more actually, and the on property collected about 40%, so you can start charging 60%.
Okay. I think we just need a watching brief on those numbers, Mr. Chairman, to make sure that, that things are moving as opposed to stalling.
Yep. I've got a related question out of interest. One of the reasons, this is my memory anyway, that reticulation was suggested when the offset rules got upgraded. One of the reasons that reticulation was suggested is because it was felt that it was a more affordable solution.
Remember the offset system, you have to apply for your own resource consent, and you have to install it. You've got a period of about 15 years of consent. You have to renew your consent, you have to maintain it, you have to get a building consent for that. So the average Rotorua property pay $20,000 at the moment. So if you can install air nozzle system, the installation is between $25,000 and $35,000 cash. No long-term payment for it, and put on top of that the ongoing maintenance, renewal, and consent processes. So probably you find here cost about 80% more than the reticulation system.
There'll be property owners that choose not to opt in, that have to comply with OSEC will be interested in that information.
I don't think
Not
maybe
our role.
I don't. The regional council position is that they will not consent our system.
Can I hear that from
I think the
regional council?
council's officer.
I've got a couple of slides on offset.
Okay, we'll pick that up later.
I'm not an expert though.
Cool. Okay, any other questions on the RLC report? No? Okay, can I have a mover in a second? Oh, sorry, there is one for me. I just wanted to note, I haven't really been close to this issue, the objection of the Rotorua Rotorua board. I know you've got one line in here that you're working through that issue with them. Is there anything, I suppose, at a strategy group level, we should be aware of, or how we might support the ongoing discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the strategy group level, I think the key consideration is that collectively we have embarked into a gradual reticulation program of sewage, or septic tanks to improve lakes water quality. I think we all share that objective, and the strategy group has adopted that objective for a number of years. There's different funding and revenue streams for each reticulation scheme, but the objective of diverting untreated wastewater from the lake is shared by everyone.
Yes.
When it comes to Arawa, obviously the scheme has enjoyed the support of the strategy group. I remind all partners here that's between August 2020 and September 2022. The strategy group exchanged significant number of letters with the ex-minister of the environment, David Parker, and especially around about in September 2022, the strategy group made a very strong resolution to David Parker not to remove the funding for Lake Tarawera, because the strategy group insisted that the Tarawera reticulation needs to proceed. Based on that and other factors, obviously we embarked on the reticulation system. Yes, we do have a different view from our colleagues and partners in Lake Rotorua Board of Control. They totally support the reticulation of Lake Tarawera. They do not want to see the pipeline installed onto their main Arawa roads going near Lake Rotorua. All range of considerations there, why they have that position and so on. We're trying to avoid a confrontational approach to it. We have sought the good offices of Tiaro Lakes Trust, Nata Turangi, Nati Ragiti, other iwi entities to help navigate that issue hopefully in a constructive and collaborative way.
Okay.
Those discussions are ongoing, and I think the respective iwi entities are working, collaborating with the council and the relevant parties to find a way forward.
Thank you, Sir Ross. Can I have a mover and a seconder that we received by our please? Anything? Those in favour say aye. Yes, carried. Okay, so whether we skipped over the Lakes Trust because you had popped out, but we're going to come to that report now. How good do Take it as read, so you just focus on the things you want to highlight.
I'll just give us some highlights. So it feels like ages ago, but we had our Te Arawa Lakes Trust Centennial Hall not long ago. So massive year for us, celebrating our 100 years existing as one of the oldest Māori trust boards. Big turnout for the event with the ministers. And along with that, we ran a series of field trips or excursions out on the boat, and that was a massive highlight with our whānau being able to show all the mahi that's going on the lakes that are, you know, feed into really the vision of the lakes program. So yeah, huge highlight. Also, the other big event that was huge for us was the Te Tūpoku Ngāwha Science and Mātauranga Fair. So this is our third year running that annual event, 147 exhibits across numerous schools. So totally, we've had about 2,800 people attend. This is growing every year now, so next year we're hoping to look for another venue. So super exciting. Obviously we had both councils there, either judging or supporting numerous awards relating to biosecurity, Mātauranga Māori, water quality, and sustainability. Also, update on the MFE funded Te Mana Te Wai funding, the Te Ora o Tarawera Impact Collective project. We had a wānanga in July with our iwi and hapu, looking at the NOF process. There's also a wānanga, 2-day wānanga this weekend out at Matata. So we're linking the Q Tai thing. So although the catchment that they're working in for that project is the 8 lakes that feed into Tarawera, we're actually linking them with the Tarawera Arawa Restoration Group, because everything that happens in those catchments obviously happens and goes out to the coast as well. So yeah, really super exciting. Big kaupapa on tomorrow, and then again on the Sunday we'll be going out on the boat, taking whānau out, demonstrating taukota, and going to cultural sites of significance. In terms of our team on the ground, capacity and capability building, 7 certified skippers, 2 more coming along. We've got 47 warranted biosecurity officers from iwi, hapu and whānau. They're just doing another training today, actually. So we've got members from Ngāti Rangitahi joining that team as well. Then the Kaitiaki Rangers, course certified commercial scientific divers, 2 more iwi divers on the way in training as well, and 8 full-time wetland restoration full-time staff at Tolt who have been able to secure ongoing contracts beyond the jobs nature. Community connection activation, so in total 3,000. Oh, I was going to keep a high level way. Sorry.
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah, well, you know, still lots of activity and people joining the Te Arawa Catfish Killers. Numbers are going down, which is awesome. There's some great data to show that although our netting efforts have gone up, our numbers are going down. And yeah, that's huge, really. Dennis touched on it, but research and innovation space, Te Arawa is getting a bigger part of that pie, and you know, we've got 4 research contracts over the next few years, looking at climate change and vulnerable species and you know, our lakes health essentially. Yeah. Just also, I don't know if Helen's mentioned, but still progressing the Lake Weed business case is one of our big priorities. You know, we think that we can achieve many outcomes. It might sound like we're just focusing on the biosecurity issue, but actually that would do a lot for us. You know, not
Can
just.
you give me a couple of examples so we understand the broader benefits?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you control the pest weed, fine. But in terms of the habitat availability for coda, vulnerable species, it's huge. We have a native seed bank that has climate change solutions in there. We believe there's many things that can be explored. We're also looking at the broader outcomes. If we're able to get that business case across the line, we'll be looking at employment for our whānau, revitalising traditional practices such as co-coda, research, also the co-benefits. So you would obviously have a pathway management plan, you'd have a surveillance and monitoring plan along with that program. And although you're talking about lakeweed, you'd actually be covering things like golden clam, any new invasives. So yeah, we'll get across the line. Good work. Yeah.
Okay, anything else you want to highlight from that report? Any questions?
You just, sorry, Kerry.
Nigel?
Oh, just on the Pakaki issue. The Arawa Lakes Trust are involved in those conversations. Anything you wish to share with us?
The three chairs are going to meet, I think, with the GM of the council. And I suppose the main issue they have is that there's, over quite a long time, they've got a record of the EVs being against it. And they felt like there was only one option that was on the table, and they thought, you know, why wasn't that farm considered, or why wasn't an in-site considered? So they've met a number of times, and it's supposed to be today they're going to meet at that chairs. Told Rotorua water control and Toyota control.
See, there's been so much, obviously, progress made in the context of Midland Dams Track.
Yes.
What, you're about to discuss potential solutions to this issue specifically.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a complicated issue really to talk at this level. I think at this stage we need to leave it to those chairs to have those initial discussions with ROC. They've got some specific issues around the process, particularly the options. So it's essentially the argument from their end is that one of the options when the whole overall scheme was being designed, one of the options was an encatchment treatment system. Yep. The feeling they have is that RRC did not do sufficient due diligence on how viable it was and quite quickly dismissed it as the fundamental issue they could see in the process from their completion. But I don't really want to discuss it anymore here, because that's full discussions. Come on. Okay, can I have a mover and a seconder for this report? You can see it. In fact, we say, oh, yes. Tomorrow. Okay, item 8.5, so Ministry for the Environment update. Verena, kaya koe te wā.
Tēnā tātou. Just a brief update, but as you'll be aware, when we last met, the Minister confirmed in June confirmation of the Bay of Plenty Regional Council wetland engineering and the incentive scheme, which we've just through the annual plan. He also approved in principle the reprioritisation of 10 million funding from the incentive scheme through to the Rotorua reticulation scheme. But the in principle was based on two things happening. One was the potential for an independent assessment of the cost variance for the Rotorua scheme. And to date, we've just want to acknowledge Stavros with working with Wes and the team, and Helen, and also Darren in terms of working through a terms of reference in terms of what that would cover, and also the provision of information. Detail of that's been presented to the Minister. We have asked the Minister whether, given what we've found, whether there was a need to go ahead with independent review, just noting that would actually take time, about a month or month and a half to process. So we're waiting to hear back on that advice and hoping to hear that before the end of this month. With the deed variation, and as Helen alluded to previously, we are looking at how we revisit the deed in its entirety, given that there's 8 years left, and probably there was a need to provide or put a bit of flexibility about how we report against that. So a draft deed has been circulated with officials from Te Arawa Lakes Trust, Bay of Plenty Regional Council and Rotorua Lakes Council. We're just working through that process now with a view of getting a paper up to the Minister early October. And depending on the outcome of his decision around the independent assessment, we would be looking to finalise that deed in October. But if the assessment had to go ahead, then that would take probably another month and a half to complete. So that's where we've got to in terms of the immediate changes. Just coming back to your earlier recommendation attached to the strategy review, the changes that we're doing now are based on the existing arrangements. It doesn't take into account anything that may come out of the strategy review. So that would be a separate process that we would have to then revisit based on the outcome of work that's conducted through that process.
Sure.
In general, the ministry, as you'll be aware, is going through a reset, which has meant we've had to reduce our staffing levels by about 40%. So we're moving, or have been moving, from staffing levels of about 1,200, which will progressively move down to around 700 by the end of 25-26. At the moment, we've had about 156 people that have taken up voluntary redundancy, and throughout this month in October, we have been going through an expression of interest process for staff in Kaimahi to reapply for roles, with a view that the new process will actually come live from 1st of November. This does mean that the way that we've been working will change slightly, and just given the breadth of what we've been covering, we're just working through how we will meet our existing arrangements, but we will keep you informed of what that looks like in subsequent updates. More broadly, in terms of the policy and regulatory work with regards to freshwater farm plans, you'll recall that there was a bit of engagement with regional council, sector groups, iwi, and non-government organisations. That information has subsequently been gathered, and you may have noted that in early September the Minister announced a pausing of the rollout of the freshwater farms while these changes were being considered, until we can think of a more practical and cost-effective way of supporting that change. So pausing the rollout will require some changes or minor changes to the Resource Management Act, which the policy teams are currently working through, but we expect the pause to be finalised before the end of this calendar year. But with these changes, and while they're being made, there is not an expectation on farmers to submit a freshwater farm plan while these changes are underway. Probably the only other significant, or just an update really, which you probably are aware, is with regards to the resource management reforms. Phase 1 was the repealing of the Natural and Built Environment Act, which happened in December 2023. Phase 2 has been the introduction of the fast track approval bills. And that process is currently before the Environment Select Committee for review and scrutiny, with the final bill readings happening in November 2024. So we're expecting a report back on the bill later this year, and then we'll be entering into phase 3, which is around replacing what is currently the RMA legislation. Probably one of the other things that is happening that I just wanted to keep you abreast, particularly because we've just had the strategy review, and I did talk around the importance of research and data, the ability to be able to tell the story and attract additional investment. There is some thinking that's going into biodiversity credits and how that might provide an opportunity to attract further investment in terms of achieving our environmental outcomes. Things are just being piloted across agencies, including DOC and ourselves at the moment, and broader conversations. But I think depending on where we land, I think this will help provide an opportunity, another avenue for the program to look at as to how they might be able to access support, even from international investment. But as I said, still in early days, still being scoped up, but I think this does present an opportunity that we'll keep you abreast of in the future. So that's really all I have to add at this point in time.
Right. Thank you, Lorena.
Chair Lorena, over here, Kent Regional Council. You mentioned, looking to tell the story all these different credits. You've lost a lot of staff and you're in the process of reductions in staff numbers and therefore sort of capacity, I guess. So things are definitely changing. And also, you know, there's a bevy of applications from community for green-based products, production and all that sort of stuff. It must have a massive effect on that, on gauging where the funding goes and how it goes. Do you have any sort of sense of prescription that's coming out? I mean, you'll be well aware of the YD estuary scenario that we've developed, and from my interpretation of that was sort of breaking it down into proof on the ground, inclusivity, and how the value is and also taking into account productivity of land, environmental issues, and creating that balance. But importantly, inclusivity was and the closeness you get to the ground in terms of providing solutions seemed to be a recipe for success of future applications. And I'm just trying to reframe this whole process of looking for funding. There's a reset, and that's all I can say. There's a reset. And I'm assuming that MFE are doing some work on that framework of how to better, I guess, articulate and position applications that are coming from community for a whole range of green-based or environmentally based projects. Can you comment on that?
What I can say, Taru, is that the resource base through government funding is, you know, we were very fortunate through the Jobs for Nature program in terms of the investment towards environmental outcomes from a government perspective, local government perspective, and other partners. I'm not sure that in this current political context, we will ever have a program of that size going forward. So what we're looking to do, and we've got people looking at international practices, working with other offshore models of what is the potential of creating a market that might attract international investment. Now, the thing that they're looking at is what is the structure that would have to be in place to support that regime? And if we think about what we've done with the carbon credits, trying to think about, well, how does that align? So I think there is an opportunity there, but we're probably a couple of years away in terms of the policy shaping and thinking. But I think as we work through that, it would be really important to ensure that we keep you informed of what that looks like, the direction we're heading, because I certainly see that there is an opportunity, particularly with this strategy group, which has invested quite a significant amount of effort into restoration of the lakes. And I think there is a narrative to be told there, but the structure that you set up, there is a structure that has to be set up to support how we would manage something like that. So yeah, not sure, Taru, but we're working through it. And I think the thing is we just need to probably share and exchange information so we can understand what the reality looks like and what we're hearing.
Yeah, I sort of think on the back of the strategy scenarios that's been laid out by Alva is timely for the Lake Strategy Group to reshape and reform itself around, I guess, current opportunities for collective action and collective impact to maximise the resources we put into and focus the work of the Te Arawa Lake Strategy Group in a way that can make a difference, but at the same time recognises the frameworks of funding that are emerging out of these changes. That's all I'm really sort of getting to.
That's right.
I think it's time.
Scalability would be important, Taru. So the collectivisation of how you bring that together would be important going forward.
Right. Okay, can I have a mover in a second that we see the regular update?
How about you, Greg?
Councillor Brown, right, yes, again, all those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Okay, next item is largely a procedural one. Confirmation of updated standing orders. I don't think you need to get up and present this one. It's pretty straightforward. We're just adding in the fact that people can join virtually and it is counted as part of the quorum. Moving a second.
New way of doing business, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to move.
Councillor Winters, Councillor Brown. Okay, item 8.7, outcome of Te Mahere Tūroa. We'll take it as read if you can just touch on any key, if you want to, are there any highlights you want to mention?
O, tēnā tātou te whare, ko e Shibata Whenua, he uri a hau no ngā iwi o Ponei o Arawa oka, he uri hoki o te whare toa o ngā rauru me Aotearoa o Mihiana. So Ashley Grant, I sit on the comms team, so help largely with the comms for the LTP, for Te Mahere Turua, but this specific report just talks to the specific engagement with iwi and some outcomes that are relevant and linked to Māori. So a couple of highlights of the 386 submissions, it was the highest that council's received. 79 were from Māori, and yeah, that's a range, so including mandated representatives of iwi and hapu. And yeah, and I think that was another high one. So the key decisions, a lot of this can be found in our Te Mahere Turua LTP document. A couple of things we did do, we held a marae hearing for the first time, and that was really, we received really good feedback for that. And also our Māori councillors in particular held specific one-on-one and hui with iwi, and so we think that also helped to raise the engagement for through the LTP. And a highlight for one of our community outcomes, Te Arapautama, which has specific links to helping the capability and capacity of Māori within the region. Yes, I think there's a list there of some things that sit under Te Arapautama, and those are currently being worked through by staff as to how they'll be managed and carried out. Yes.
I've got a quick question. I'm not sure if you can answer it, but the Regional Māori Initiatives Fund, can I just give a bit of an idea of what that what types of things it supports?
Through the cheek, and I was too.
Come on. Sorry. The Regional Māori Initiatives Fund, so there's 200 grand per annum being set aside for that. Give me a sense of what types of things does it support?
Regional initiatives.
Come on. Okay, you can send us some information.
Yeah.
Down the track. Oh, good. Come
I
on.
think it's still being worked with. A couple of those funds are, it's still being worked in terms of what that criteria will look like and then how they'll be distributed.
Come on.
There's quite a lot of reflect. Sorry, carry on.
I'm just thinking that just the regional co-governance secretariat fund, that's the one that I talked about earlier with Sawita.
Nice.
We'd hope to access that to help Sawita. Yeah.
Just a comment if I might, thank you for the report. There's quite a, really congratulations on your consultation with iwi and LTP. It's quite a good reflection as well of our experiences of going out from the regional council, going out to the community, doing it on marae, and also the one-on-ones. That works, and it's just a reflection of the fact that, going to iwi is the best way to get them to connect. Expecting them to come to you, which has been quite traditional in a way, it doesn't work. And we broke all records as well, which is what you're actually experiencing too, around that connection with iwi in your constituencies. So I just wanted to, say, congratulations really. And we share in the same space. And it was when I say broke records, it broke all records. And the articulation of those submissions from iwi was really strong. It was really strong, well researched, well thought through, and very clear, and has made a difference in terms of the decisions we needed to make around our council table. And I'm sure it could be a reflection around your council table as well, as we move towards trying to get contributions from our people heard, and not sort of thought of as a secondary situation, which can easily happen if we're not actually around that table, making submissions and making our arguments very clear, or our debates very clear. So congratulations.
Have a mover and seconder.
Mariana.
Mariana, are you happy to move? Come on. So Mariana and Councillor Brown. Those in favour say aye. Against. Okay, thank you, Ashley. Item 8.8. Actually, I'm conscious food has arrived and we're going to have a break, but I'm of the view we could probably push through.
Yes.
And get this done. Okay. Cool. So that's you, Joe.
I don't mind if you eat during it, because my stomach says it's every time.
Actually, how much time do you think you need? Because my stomach is.
Yeah, 2 minutes, get through a
I reckon eat your sandwich, now if you second, just make sure you've got your toes on.
Cool.
Cool. We will have a scientist joining us shortly. I'm unsure about what time we're going to get on, so we'll just hop on. Here he is. May I introduce Paul, one of our water quality scientists, and Margaret Courtney. So this is just a brief, well, no, it's not brief, but I'll make it as brief as I can. Oh. We can circulate the slides afterwards if you want, because it goes deeper than the report. If you can flip to the next slide. Or can I do that? So there's a few topics we'll discuss today, and this is an opportunity to get an idea of what the freshwater plan is about before a draft is released later this year. So we're going to cover, although Marina did quite a good job of a central government context, water quality of weeds, water quantity, offset and forestry are a few things that we'll cover today. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so the freshwater planning process, where we're up to. Later this year, in November, December, we're planning to release our draft freshwater plan, excluding any farming provisions, which would be included in a discussion document. So that would come up with some options about how far we might want to go in a farming space. But the rest of the plan, which is a review and update of the current regional plan and implementation of the National Policy Statement for Freshwater, will be released later this year for targeted engagement. So after that targeted engagement phase, we'll set a policy position, and currently the plan is to notify September next year. That of course is up for changing depending on the central government context and the position of our council close to the time. Following the release of a notified plan, then it goes through a freshwater hearings process. Okay, all right. We can actually skip this one. It's just pretty much what the regional plan will be covering. Will be take, use, damming, diversion of water, structures in the water, land use, disturbance activities, those sorts of things. Central government context. Oh gosh, that's terrible. Okay, central government context. The key one to note here is there's a lot changing at a central government level right now. So the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, the National Environmental Standard for Freshwater, changes are to be made next year on that. So we're still progressing at this time with what we do know, which is the current National Policy Statement for Freshwater and the current regulations that are in place. And as new information comes from central government, new direction, we will pivot as required.
I think that's an important point. Our council has agreed to continue to pursue some degree of predictability from our perspective, and being able to have the flexibility to pivot. You know, you can sit there, you can wait for it to happen to you and then try and make the changes, or you can almost second guess from the information your best possible position, but allow flex to pivot and make the changes as and when we need to.
Cool. So we can go to the next one, Miranda. Okay. So this is just, we've seen this one a few times before. The current NPSFM talks about values and visions and targets and rules and environmental takes and flows and those sorts of things. And a lot of it's not new. A lot of it's already in our regional plan. And especially in the Rotorua region, we're actually far further ahead than the rest of the region. We have
plan change 10, which really sets nitrogen loads and targets. And we've got Rule 11, which restricted intensification and other lake catchments. The rest of the region doesn't have those sorts of things. So the concept of controlling diffuse discharges in the East Coast or kati is new for them. What else was I going to tell you at this one? I think parts of this are quite important to that strategy review that Alva was presenting on this morning, and it's all quite relevant. So where the strategy can direct the freshwater plan change, that's great opportunity for RTA and SG and the parties around the table to have give us great direction. So Miranda, do you want to change the next slide? So we're required at the moment to have a vision per freshwater management unit, and you may notice from a little bit highlighted there, the vision is based, the initial part of the vision is based on the vision of the strategy. One change that has been made from what's in the vision currently through engagement was that discussion we had this morning as well about preserved versus restored. And so restored has been used in this context at the moment. And I have had, and I haven't personally, had a translation because we changed from preserved to restored, then we attempted to use or, so instead of,
We've got some copies coming.
okay, Manakitia, that went to Homanutia. So I don't know, you guys might have a thought on that, but it was an attempt to sort of acknowledge that change of language from preserved to restored. But if you want to change it some other way, please let me know.
Does it improve it?
Makes it obvious.
Okay, cool.
Probably more aligned because Monarchia is suggesting that preserving is already there, whereas Homonutia is restored.
You're just many.
So this is, I think, the vision when it is released in sort of November-ish would be an area of interest for this group to provide their feedback on. It isn't as restricted by the legislation as the strategy document may be. So if you want further things in it, there's the opportunity to have goals specific to lakes, or I think some of the ones I was hearing this morning were about dedicating a lake to Koda, which we haven't included in the vision, but if there was a position on that prior to notification and those sorts of things we could include. And I think it covers everything quite broadly at this stage, so that use and enjoyment acknowledges those recreational values that came across strongly this morning and the cultural values. But we also have recognition of what that land is used for in these visions as well. So it's about focusing on sustainable land use and water management. So we can have good water quality, mahi and kai thrives, ecosystem health. And so in some of our lake catchments, that's just about preserving what we already have in our, quite high water quality and ecosystem health lakes, and some it's about potentially improving practices, discharges, those sorts of things to see improvement. We have a 2045 timeframe proposed in the for this vision at the moment, but whether or not that might need to be extended out or is up for debate. Across the region, we have a range of timeframes, sort of 2035, where there's not a lot of water quality challenges or water quantity challenges in a catchment, to 2065, Waihi Estuary and Kaituna, where we're talking about significant reductions in loads to those estuaries. So next, probably a couple you can, oh, it's not in there, that's all right, oh, okay. So I just wanted to kind of highlight a few water quality targets that we talk about in the plan change. So there's a whole bunch of contaminants or measurements that we use, so nitrogen, phosphorus, sediment, E. coli, ammonia, nitrate, loads of them that we're required to monitor and set targets for under the national policy statement. Key ones for the lakes, focusing on.
Gemma, can I ask a question? When
Yes.
you set targets
Yes.
for these contaminants,
Yes.
you mean set limits?
So, yeah, it's all terminology. So there's a target. At the moment, we've got a baseline measurement in 2017.
Yep.
And that says, can you share? Oh, yeah, okay.
No,
I can see a little bit more.
I don't want to detail. All I'm just saying is that.
Is it a hard number?
What is going to distinguish between a target and the limit? The limit, there's some science behind it, because if you exceed that limit, you contaminate the water.
Yes.
But that presumably those limits would be based on some science evidence.
So there's a national bottom line for nearly all of these attributes, where they're saying your impact is too great on the environment. So that's been scientific, that's from national science direction.
Okay, so we're going to use that.
So that's the bottom line, and there's options whether you're aiming for A, B, or C type approach to whether you're looking for a pristine environment, whether it's a good or passing.
So what's our approach to that? Is that our approach at least meet the national baselines before we actually push the envelope?
So that's a requirement, is to meet the national bottom line.
Okay.
But one of the exemptions for that is naturally occurring processes. So in parts of our region, because of the geology, we have really high
Arsenic,
reactive phosphorus.
like Porenga streams got high arsenic in it, for example, okay?
Yeah.
So is that a national occurrence?
Yeah, I can't answer that one for you, but if it's got lots of geothermal inputs, I would assume. Yeah, that's purely from my speculation there. And arsenic is not one of the requirements in the national policy statement for fresh water. Okay, but we can discuss that one if you'd like to. So this one is sort of a summary of where our lake catchments are at. We're talking about small load reductions in all the green ones, moderate reductions being potentially a 10 to 30% reduction, and red is over 30% reduction. So this is still being worked on, so it may be subject to change. And that's just nitrogen and phosphorus. I would acknowledge that we do have large E. coli reductions estimated for the Lake Rotorua catchment. We have a number of rivers that don't meet swimming standards in the Lake Rotorua catchment. And I guess the other thing I would say, we're talking about Alba's presentation this morning, it was about how do you weave the heart and science together. This is the science, but it's to achieve the heart, so the swimming or the water quality or the clarity of the water that we might want to see in the lakes. Go to the next slide. So I was just focusing on a couple of attributes that I thought would be of interest to the committee. Cyanobacteria, we've got a couple of spots that don't meet those national bottom lines, and that's Lake Rotorua and Lake Arawa. I guess when we think about health warnings and when we see those, probably not a surprise that we have some lakes that don't meet those national bottom lines.
So if we got more rain, Rotorua would be meeting bottom lines?
Paul, do you want to answer that one?
Sorry, can you repeat that, Councillor White? It was a bit of a disturbance there. I couldn't quite catch it.
Oh, just a chip away comment that if we had more rain for Rotorua, it might improve the bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's the thing with both Lake Rotorua and Rotorua react quite similarly. They're both what we call polymitic lakes. They intermittently stratify, so that means they lose their oxygen connection and release nutrients, which in summer seasons exacerbates those cyanobacteria blooms. And so the more lows and poor weather you have, the less cyanobacteria you might get. But that rain might come to bite you the next year.
Well, thank you for that very deep analysis of my travel.
So I did notice this morning there was some discussion on the water leaving the Oho Channel and the Kaituna flowing down to Makatu. And so we've got these sorts of maps for the whole region. If anyone was interested, you can access them. But the sediment discussion, sediment is in a poorer state in the Oho Channel versus the Kaituna outlet. So what you're observing, we see in the science as well. For dissolved reactive phosphorus, when it leaves at the Kaituna outlet, it's in the A band, so it's the best quality water as kind of expected. But by the time you get to the lower Kaituna and those monitored sites, it's in the D band.
Is it because of the activities going down the Kaituna that are from land use? Parts
of it will be. There's also, I'm not sure if it's within the specific spots, but that discussion of naturally occurring DRP comes into it as well for parts of our region.
It's also just something to be careful, mindful to compare these things. As sometimes they're not comparable. Lakes are sinks of nutrients, so they will absorb that nutrient. So that signature that comes out of a lake is quite different to what you'll find in a river in its natural environment. And particularly when you've got a lot of algae in these lakes, they're utilising that phosphorus quite readily, and it drops out into the lake, as I said, being a sink.
Gemma, what do you mean the sediment, how channel is quite poor?
So it is in a poorer state. So I'd have to have a look at the numbers, but it's a possibility.
Can I put my hand? That's a bit complicated as well. So the National Policy Statement has an attribute, it's called suspended fine sediment, but it's actually based on water clarity. So why we say the water clarity is in a poor state, that's actually because of the phytoplankton. Not necessarily the sediment, but sediment is part of the whole visual state, including phytoplankton. So again, it's a bit of a nuanced complexity in that system.
Okay, you've got suspended solids in the body, in the column of the water, which encourage this lot of plankton.
I might leave that one.
Okay, leave it.
Okay. So
is it around the fine sedimentation? It's not about sediment because what we know about mahinga kai and kakihi beds, they're going to be negatively impacted by fine sediment build-up and all that. Is that addressing that or not really?
There's two different measurements. We've got deposited fine sediment and then suspended fine sediment. So I think the Kakihi beds and such will be focusing on what's deposited, but what's suspended will get deposited. Yeah. So submerged invasive plants is another one that's required by the National Policy Statement and one that this group is particularly interested in. We have some lakes where it's stable, some lakes where we have improving trends, and some where we have declining trends. Rotorua and Rotoiti are below the national bottom lines for invasive and native plant species. Next year, we can probably go to. Oh, if you want to have a look at this page. We have a baseline state of 2017 for our attributes. and we have an option of, we have to get to the national bottom line, but then it's up to the community in terms of whenua, how far they want to go above that national bottom line. So we have Rotorua and Rotorua where we do want to make improvements, and then the other ones become an optional decision as to what's realistic, what can we achieve in those other lake catchments. So if this group wanted to provide an opinion on what they want to see for SPI or weed species in our lakes, then and I think it goes quite well with that investment in product weed discussion that you guys have been having.
Is this the forum where you're actually asking for this feedback, like today?
No. So, I mean, you are welcome.
You just update.
If you have that feedback now, that's fine, but it's giving you a heads up that in November, December, when this gets released, these are the sorts of things that you might be interested in providing that feedback on, like weed. Yeah. Okay, so next one.
Gemma, just on that note, when we don't need to give feedback today, I know you've got quite a lot of detail in here. You know, I don't want to rain on your parade, but I don't think we need to go through that at this stage.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Do people agree? Yeah. I think, but what I am interested, however, is just so can you just reiterate the timing of when feedback will be required, just to ensure we can line ourselves up right.
Do you know
feeding
what
into the
closes?
process.
Well, we're still waiting, the councillors, I think, have got to make a decision on when they're gonna release the draft.
Yes.
And it's maybe in November, I think.
Yeah, I think we're looking at around November.
Yeah, early November, and then there'll be a couple of months for the community to be invited to.
That's essentially an informal consultation process. They are not.
Yeah, so it's the draft.
It's the draft that
Yeah.
is going out.
So just to focus our conversation today, out of interest, is there anything in the draft that you feel may be inconsistent with what the strategy group has set in terms of the lakes program?
I think there's options available within it. So yeah, as I said, if you want to provide input on vision to be more specific about certain things you want to achieve as a group, then put those forward.
We're in an environmental flex and pivot, really.
Yes.
So basically, but I think it's really, really important for the Arawa Lake Strategy Group to be able to do this in the context of your future determinations around how you see the world emerging out of our strategic discussions here and how that might influence anything downstream as we, because you're going to get into the next year, you know, and that's going to be, November, December, January, that'll be gone in the context of people's ability to be around the table. So we really do need to have some forward thinking, I think, out of it in the context of what's happening here, just as a high level, and being prepared to really create the detail of thinking from what is best from this collective group here in the interests of our lakes. I think that's really important to stay on the front foot with this one.
And then the other note is that, as you said, the discussion document on farming options is a separate piece. And that will cover that how much we might achieve within this plan change. If we're talking about intergenerational change, and what, so that one's going to go out to farmers with what are they comfortable with, what can they see being reasonable, practical, effective. And so
that'll be quite a big ticket item around the productivity of land in the context of what our expectations are from an IL perspective, how that balance is achieved that enables land to be, be productive, but in the context, from the context of also environmental practice. So it's going to be an interesting tension.
And just to note too, from the Pepper Māori perspective, if there's any eagle feedback or not that direct engagement in terms of the draft policy, we're happy to come and meet with them directly. They want to have those policy discussions specific. We've got currently under the plan is Katia Tanga chapter, but that's moving to a Tanga chapter. So we're also looking at a discussion document as well, that we release it around the same time. Just so everybody can understand those provisions as well. And then we're also looking at an initiative similar to Friends of the Submitter that we had for LTP. We've got a couple of policy experts that we're going to bring in and just help the iwi authorities, if they need it, the support to provide their feedback as well during that feedback period. As you can imagine, iwi Māori have lots of kaupapa going on at the moment, and so we just want to support where we can so that they can provide their feedback into the draft plan changes as well.
Yeah, I think it's an important issue around transparency for our people. You're taking them on the journey, which is all what we desire, rather than get through and have the headache afterwards.
Sure.
It really is important that the communication aspects are actually in place. And I think this particular group, the Arawa Lake Strategy Group, is a collective impact group. And Te Arawa Lakes Trust have a very strong mandate from Te Arawa to work to the best interests of the lakes. You've got all the land entities around there as well who contribute to the quality of the lakes, and farmers, and we're farmers and we're agriculturists, as I've already said. So it's actually, that's quite a challenging thing, but I think communications and how we activate that is going to be really important in order to really give life and breath to contributions we make sooner rather than later. After the fact is usually too damn late.
Yes, yeah.
Could I make the suggestion? I'm just conscious that November, or depending on where the timing lands, our next meetings in December, I think, of just staff of the organisations keep abreast of this timing and have a think about from a collective strategy group perspective what we might need to input into this process, because we'll need to consider it at the December meeting. Notwithstanding the individual organisations can put in their own submissions as well. I'm just conscious of the strategy group input to the process. Okay, thank you very much, Gemma. Thank you. Can I have a mover and a seconder to proceed?
Greg is second.
And Councillor Brown, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Our final item is the correspondence received in terms of Golden Clam. So we've had some correspondence back from the Minister. I'll take that as read. Are there any particular matters arising that people want to comments?
Any issues that need to be signaled about the Golden Clam issue?
No, they're meeting weekly now.
Are they?
Yeah, I think we can just
Zooming
make
on
an
Mondays.
update, so one of the positions we put forward in the letter was about having automated gate access to the lake, so that's actually been progressed.
Oh, good.
Yeah, well, they call for Taina, so they're meeting regularly with Will and in terms of setting that up and looking what that's gonna look like. Yeah.
All good, Will?
Yeah.
It will be okay. Just Councillor Winters earlier mentioned there was something in the media about $7 million being provided to NIWA from the government for Golden Clam eradication work. I just want to make a note of that if staff could find that information, just circulate it so we're aware of what's happening there. Otherwise, Councillor Brown.
Kia ora through you, Mr. Chairman. As part of the funding that's become available and the work that's being done, is there any talk of dog detection training? William and I had a bit of a chat about this. I'm not sure where that got to for Golden Clams.
No, it hasn't been. No update on that. So
Well, Ian Kusevs is trying to progress it with the person that had done her PhD in it or something, but she's pretty tied up with things, so that's the best update I can give you on that.
Do we think that's a good tool in the toolkit that we want to push?
I like it. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Yep.
Yeah, it easily fits in within our advocacy work at the boat ramps. Biosecurity officers have the power to have biosecurity dogs there, so yep.
If we are bringing this Lakeway business case back, that includes, as we said earlier, pathway management. So you wouldn't just control traffic on a wide scale
without ensuring that you prevented incursions, and not just of weed, but of everything effectively. So that could be one of those long-term things that could, if we, it would need to be funded. All of this, these are all great ideas, but they're just subject to funding, and there really isn't any at the moment. But we'll follow up on that NIWA one for you, about the 10 million. I'm not sure what that is exactly for. But I guess the response from the minister didn't really give any of the things that we'd asked for. He does say that the officials will engage with strategy group, but I haven't heard from anyone on that. So there's no additional funding really other than that 10 million, which I'll follow up on. Yeah.
Do you have any comment on that, Lorena? Sorry, Mr. Chair.
I don't have very little to do with biosecurity, but I would say securing new monies is extremely hard in this current context. So it has to be reprioritisation.
The question for me is the frequency of EDNA testing to monitor for potential presence.
I mean, I think our team's done over 400 and so EDNA tests, but hand on heart, if you ask me, are we, have we got a good surveillance program in place? That my answer is no. EDNA doesn't go far enough. You also need visual surveillance, and there's not also, hey, we're doing EDNA tests every, twice a year. There's no plan like that.
Okay.
I think some of it might have, regional council might be tagged into your guys' program, but no, there's no commitment to ongoing surveillance and monitoring plan, which is definitely problematic. I do think that NIWA funding was surveillance and research and control.
I'll find out about that and we can circulate something on that, just so you know what it was for. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think too, the not duplicating effort and just making sure that NIWA are linking in with us. Like we've had those examples of we had divers in the water the same day, MPI sent divers to look for stuff. So let's link up with NIWA and make sure we're lining it all up together.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any final comments, questions on this problem claims matter? Kyle? Okay, can I have a mover and seconder just to receive those reports? So Brown, Rangiti, those in favour say aye, against carried. Okay, we're at the end of the hui, Rangiti, can I ask you to, can I get
If they hear the get the call, you want to, only